Snow at Heaven's Edge. Chapter 8. Chen Daming was not a gambler, and the thought of what the men had asked of him terrified him. He was a drinker, however, and the warm liquor calmed his nerves. 2 flasks lay empty in front of him, and he helped himself to a third when he saw Lin Wuai return alone. He smelled her sweet fragrance from a distance, and when she neared, it felt like spring. He remembered her asking something, to which he replied, "No, I haven't seen them." As if in a dream, Chen Daming wasn't sure of anything else except that the woman was dazzling, and like all dreams eventually do, the woman vanished. Ming-er returned. The innkeeper waved him off, but the boy approached him anyway. "Sir, I could not find Xiang," he said in an apologetic tone. His eyes showed more fear than concern for the missing man. "That's all right. Go on now, go on." Ming-er's eyes widened, shocked by how easy he was let off. Glee replaced fear, and the young boy bowed and ran off. The innkeeper sighed and poured himself another cupful. The wretched creature, Feng Xiaoyan, also returned. Her dirty outer garment was ruined, seams busted in many places and sleeves nearly shredded. Apprehension draped her like a wet cloth. As she walked past the innkeeper, Lin Wuai reappeared. The helpless girl ran to the young woman and muttered something into her ear. Chen Daming could not make out what was said, but it infected the beauty with unease. Lin Wuai hurried out the door while the village Gorgon hung around for a while before feeling self-conscious and withdrew into Lin's room. The innkeeper downed another cup of liquor in his hand and sighed. The intermittent snowfall had turned into a blizzard. Xiang thought she heard wolves howling, but it could just as likely be the wind. She was not cold. The fire, chewing through the pile of wood and twigs, burned with voracious delight and provided enough warmth for the two of them. What exactly does this madman want? She ached all over. The man had tied her hands behind her back, forcing her shoulders uncomfortably backwards. The ropes dug into her wrists, and while they did not completely cut off circulation to her hands, they were tight enough to obstruct blood flow, sending a sharp tingling sensation to her fingertips. She winced and tried to readjust her position. Lying on her right side put too much pressure on her right cheek, where a nasty bruise had begun to swell. She bled from the many small cuts across her body, and they burned whenever she moved. The man was mad. She was sure of it. Xiang looked in his direction. He sat cross-legged and appeared in deep contemplation, a rather sharp contrast to the birch-wielding lunatic who whipped her until she passed out. She sat up, and though he did not move, she knew he was aware of her every movement. Her dagger was deep in her breast pocket. At least, she still had her weapon, but she dared not make an attempt for it yet. Timing was everything. Xiang closed her eyes. Only with an empty mind can infinite possibilities occur, Wuai often said. Breathe in, breathe out. The fire was chewing through something hard, and it crackled and burped. She opened her eyes. He was still sitting there in some deep and probably deranged thought. Focus, she told herself. She closed her eyes again. Breathe in, breathe out. Xiaoyan, did he kill her? Focus. Breathe in, breathe out. Frustration seeped into her cluttered mind, and flashes of anger, like lightning, lit up her nerves. She tensed up. She again opened her eyes to stare at the man. She wanted to devour him, tear him from limb to limb, or slice him open with her dagger from throat to pelvis. She was losing it, losing control. She sensed that her breathing was more rapid, more frenzied. That was the first thing she had to retain control of and focus on. Breathe in, breathe out. To master others, one must master oneself. Breathe in, breathe out. Hate will not help. Only calmness will. Only calmness. Breathe in, breathe out. Her mind began to empty. Her emotions slowly washed away, allowing emptiness to take its place. Xiang focused intently on one task. To escape. How to escape? It would have to occur in 3 steps. Free the hands, make for the exit, find help. Step 1, free the hands. The dagger. That was too far, too hard to reach without alarming him. Rocks. There were rocks. She would have to back up against one of them. Find one with jagged edges. That's good. What else? The fire. If she got close enough and was desperate enough, she could burn through it. Breathe in, breathe out. He would know. He would have to go away somehow or be distracted. Or I would have to be stealthy. He's too strong to be killed. I can't kill him. I have to escape. go for the exit. Where am I? Which direction do I run? Would I be buried alive out there? The storm sounds worse. A lot worse. Breathe in, breathe out. The room was empty. The pillow and the sheets were left untouched. The smell of incense barely covered the stench of alcohol. Gao Ming did not want to stay in that room much longer. A stale air of death loomed over the place just like it did the man. Live in the past, die in the past. He smiled at the irony. We're both dead. He was not hungry, but he wandered down to the restaurant anyway. Where is she? He heard a familiar voice asked. It belonged to the girl from this morning. I think that is a question only you can answer, he replied tersely, curious at the strangeness of the question. The waiter returned and placed a plate of boiled spinach and a flask of liquor on the table. He picked up a pair of chopsticks and began to stuff the vegetable down his throat. He liked the blandness of taste. She appeared pensive, evaluating his words and gestures, and ultimately came up with a verdict on his character. Helping her earlier was good for his cause. He took another mouthful and washed it down with the strong liquor. He did not like to get drunk, but he liked the explosiveness of the drink in his mouth. It provided a nice contrast. Who would have taken her? She directed the question to herself, but it was loud enough for him to hear. He ignored her. It was not his business. Plus, the food was good. Privately, however, he wondered as well. Perhaps the precocious child had the same effect on this wretched girl as she did him. Her large bright eyes brimming with tears flooded his memory, and he felt his heart tightened. Lechers and brothels, desperate for fresh flesh, would occasionally act brazenly, but this was not the case. He knew who would have done it. The question that plagued him now was whether he should confront the old man. Confrontation was inevitable. He shared the same fervent desire as the old fool to challenge Lin Wuai. Gao Ming had so far been unmatched, but the prospect of facing that man somehow made him uncertain. He needed all his wits and strength to stand a chance. The idea of risking injury to save a stranger and possibly jeopardize such a grand opportunity to become the best swordsman in the rivers and lakes was inconceivable. Where is Miss Li's pretty companion? I don't know, Feng Xiaoan said with reservation. He studied her expression, which showed a subtle ambivalence. He wondered what that was. Ambivalence is good. The conflict makes us work for something, and by doing so, we feel alive. He drank some more, savoring its strong, angry burn on the soft, vulnerable layers of mucosa. The clattering of armor emanating from the entrance of the inn drew their attention. Soldiers entered and barred the doors. Several of them were wounded and bleeding, supported by their comrades. What held her attention was a burly man with a long, bristly beard that stood in the middle of the U-shaped formation the soldiers had taken. He had large, fiery eyes that threatened to swallow all within his gaze. He held a 13-foot spear that was certainly too long and heavy for anyone to wield but the 7-footer himself. The tassels on the spear hung like long, bloody whiskers, and the sharp, leafy blade gleamed ice blue in the light. Xiaoyan felt a sudden chill and turned to her companion, expecting to find him staring as she had at the spectacle, or still dining on his leafy greens. An ingot of silver lay on the table, but the man, like an apparition, had vanished. Lin Wuai saw the cloud of mist that stemmed from the snow leopard's muzzle, even through the heavy snowfall. The animal growled deep and resonant as it circled and surveyed its prey. The old man, who was the focus of the beast's attention, appeared calm, one hand folded behind his back and the other slowly stroking the long white beard that cascaded down to his chest. He remained stationary, even as the beast moved. The snow leopard snorted, taunting the old man to rash action, but he did nothing. The contest was one of will. The beast's grumbling grew louder as it became increasingly impatient, but the snarl of its fangs, the glow of its eyes, and the size of the animal meant nothing to the old man. Snow battered his face, and he narrowed his eyes to a slit, but they never blinked. His expression remained unchanged, calm, reflective, and patient. He wants to outweight the beast. Time is on my side, the old man seemed to say. In a heartbeat, all went quiet. This moment of tranquility was more terrifying than the dance of bravado and intimidation. Wuai reached for the handle of his sword as the animal leapt forward. The contest ended. A loud crack sounded over the howling wind. The large leopard, almost twice the size of any Wuai had seen, fell backward with a whimper. The old man had kicked the air and courage out of the animal, and it stared one last time at its opponent before slowly walking away. Wuai slid his hand from the hilt of his blade. Had the old man not pulled his cake, the animal would have died instead of nursing a few broken ribs. Wuai was amazed, relieved, and ecstatic all at the same time. "Senior, are you alright?" The old man turned and appeared surprised to find someone, other than himself, outdoors in face of the oncoming blizzard. He nodded. "We should go indoors before it arrives." The old man led Wuai to an abandoned temple. A fire was already burning. A table formerly used for offerings now held several pots and a teapot. The remains of several pieces of furniture laid in the back corner, so well mutilated that they became indistinguishable from one another. A large wooden carving of the enlightened being sat in meditation on the center platform, and several small censers lined the bottom of his feet. Lin Wuai wondered when the statue too would find itself sacrificed as firewood. "Since Lin Wuai has the pleasure of meeting Senior, will you honor me by giving your name?" "Qiang Kong." Wuai studied the man under better light. He was dressed neatly in a white and blue Taoist robe, but he wore none of the symbols or ornaments that suggested he belonged to any of the Taoist sects like Wudang or Huashan, even though his name and demeanor suggested a deep cultivation in the philosophy of Taoism and the teachings of the enlightened being. His face had creased with the passage of time, but his eyes sparkled with vigor. When he spoke, his voice was clear and full of life. His movements were fast, light, and powerful, as Lin Wuai had witnessed. "Senior Qiang Kong, I am looking for a friend, a 10-year-old girl." "I'm afraid I have not seen your friend." He handed the young man a warm cup of tea. "Thank you. You will find nothing in this weather. It is best to wait for the storm to pass." Lin Wuai need not look out to know how fierce the weather had gotten. The constant high-pitched wailing of the wind and the violent, undulating dance of the flames told him everything. He knew the old man was right, but his palms still rested on the floor and his elbows curved at a springy 45-degree angle, ready to prop up his athletic frame at any moment. Qiang Kong smiled. Needless worrying is the cause of man's suffering. Wuai relaxed slightly. "Senior is a skilled swordsman, and you are an excellent pugilist," replied the old man, intrigued by the young man's sharp eye. All said, the seemingly infinite variations of the various schools of martial arts are grounded in similar core principles. The myriad of forms came from different applications to suit different purposes. Various styles of fists have their origins in spear forms or sword stances. Similarly, to a skilled fighter, weapons are nothing more than a natural extension of his body, commanding all with equal dexterity and comfort. An expert fighter and swordsman are one and the same. "You are a rare one," Qiang Kong added, almost as a passing thought. He inspected the younger man, his scholarly look, friendly smile, intelligent eyes. Not one aspect of the man suggested that he was as dangerous as Yan Wang himself. "You carry such a deadly blade, yet I cannot sense it, nor do I smell the stench of blood on you. But you have killed many." "I have killed a lot." The remark was simply stated, and lacked the prideful joy that many swordsmen had in declaring the number of lives they took, but it also lacked guilt or remorse. There was no shame in his actions. Rather, it was simply thus he had killed. He had a strange serenity, more common in men much older, that had faced down many adversities. This tranquility was the result of self-understanding and the perception of the world as it truly is, the very clear distillation of truth amongst the vapors of deception, the overwhelming confidence in his chosen path that the mirages of the world could not lead him astray. Lin Wuai's aura was not one of menace, but quite the contrary. This stabilizing calm was warm like a bonfire in cold winter and as refreshing as a sea breeze in hot summer. Strangely, beneath this layer, Qiang Kong could detect a quiver of uncertainty, not doubt. This young swordsman had a question begging for an answer. "Then you know much about the sword," the old man said. The young man thought for a moment and then spoke. "I know that the ultimate spirit of the sword is life." "Life. Yes. Each time a sword is drawn, the decision is made, to protect life or end it. Often the two occur. Vitality, power, strength, and the notion of invincibility all dissipate like the morning fog in one simple stroke. Life's fragility and transience are accelerated and accentuated at the tip and at the edge of the blade." Well said, Chang Kong laughed. Well said indeed. He glanced at the sword by Lin Wuai's side. No ornaments of precious gems decorated the hilt scabbard, which from the smell was made from sandalwood. Missing were carvings of dragons, qilings, or tigers. Only a few characters in expert calligraphy ran down the center, dividing the top and bottom half of the scabbard symmetrically. Wuai saw that the man was paying a keen interest to his sword and offered it to him for perusal. Chang Kong read the inscriptions. The eternal flow of the clear river feels heavy upon the palm, but whispers a tranquil calm, so that in darkness make light, as the days turn to night. And though it is life I embrace, 'tis death I make haste. Chang Kong smiled. Skill and character, not inanimate objects, were the ornaments meant for this sword. He was even more eager to see the blade. Placing a hand on the hilt, he drew the scabbard away. The sword made a small, crisp ring as it slid out. The blade was not light. It felt full and firm, with substance like its master. The sword has a soul. He peered into it, into the dark black core, and followed the dense wavy patterns down the spine. The light to gray edges surrounded the center with its coiled patterns that spread out at angles resembling feathers on a bird in flight. The edges showed no sign of chipping or rolling. The blade was pristine. As he turned the blade this way and that, the sword reflected the light in waves of darkest blue that earned it the name Qinghe. Please, Senior, it would be a shame not to see your sword stances, urged Lin Wuai, eager to see this strange, though certainly skilled swordsman display his swordplay. If you won't mind seeing an old man embarrass himself, he said, and walked into an open area. The old man transitioned from the classic reverse grip to a forward one. The movements were slow and controlled. He stepped forward, slow again, then with a sudden motion, sped up the downswing. And Qinghe parted the air in a loud, crisp whistle, thus collapsed into the vacuum. The old man had already turned completely around with the sword thrust out. He drew invisible circles in the air, and each time with such inner chi that the air itself sizzled and crackled. Shock and awe filled Wuai's heart, and he recalled an old saying, "There is beyond the heavens, heaven, and there are beyond mountains, mountains." When the old swordsman finished, Wuai prostrated himself. "Thank you, Senior, for the lesson." Chang Kong stroked his white beard and handed the blade back to its owner. "At your stage, an old man like me has little to teach. However, I do have a small advice." "Do give, Senior. I would cleanse my ears to listen." Wuai spoke humbly and earnestly. He was, after all, an avid learner, and it was indeed a rare moment to find a qualified master. To learn the sword properly, one must have the right mind. Those, like the servants, who vow to not kill, are never fit to hold a sword, and are deluding themselves. Likewise, those who have a loose scabbard are nothing more than killers and murderers, and no less incompetent. A good swordsman must have good discernment. Secondly, to swing the sword well, a man's character must be well. He must be disciplined in his practice and in his mind. Otherwise, he would be cut down in battle. Along with discipline, he must be creative. Only with a disciplined and thus empty mind, clear of all confines of form and stances, can he naturally react, improvise, and create. This is how techniques are improved and how swordsmanship evolves. Lastly, he must be courageous, unafraid of death, but not willing to relinquish life. These you have. Thus you're an elite swordsman. But do you know what you lack? Lin Wuai sat and thought for a while, going over many of the mistakes he had made in the past, and any current bad forms or habits he was working on, but all of them seemed too small and trivial for Chang Kong to pick up on. He shook his head and replied, "Please enlighten me, master." The old master motioned for the young swordsman to take his place in the open space. Lin Wuai did not know where to start. A simpler form would not do, and yet he was not completely recovered from his internal injuries to expand the amount of inner chi the old master had. He decided on the Xuan swordplay, which focused on speed and derived all its power from that singular quality. His heart quickened to liven his senses and his reflexes. He heard the wind outside and the rustle of the thatched straws on the ground underneath his feet, and the groan of the roof tiles as snow piled on relentlessly. He heard these sounds with the keen knowledge that he was in control of their volume through his focus. Whenever he held a sword and swung, he enclosed himself in a compartmentalized space which only he occupied, a space where time slowed. Each stroke was precise, like his calligraphy. To the outside observer, his multitude of stances and forms merged into a blur of blue, one long arc merging with the next. He finished. Xiang Kong gave no reaction. He asked for the sword again, and Wuai expected another demonstration from the old man, but was shocked to hear him say, "Now show me it again, without the sword." Wuai tried to demonstrate the essence of the swordplay through similarly arranged fist or palm forms, but the old man kept shaking his head and insisted on an exact encore, which was impossible without the blade. The old master did not bother to get up. He yawned and stretched out his limbs while beginning to recite an old Buddhist poem from the venerable master Huineng. Bo tree is no tree, nor is the mind a standing mirror bright. Since all is originally empty, where does the dust alight? Hey, you've made it to the end. If you like it so far, please subscribe and like. This lets me know I'm on the right path. And if you can't wait for the next installment of Snow at Heaven's Edge, then head on over to Amazon and read the story in its entirety for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Alternatively, you can check out Dreamweaver and Duo on Mount Taiyuan as well. Both of these stories are done and available for free here on YouTube, Spotify, and Audible. If you want to support me, please consider going to my Ko-fi and being a member. Have a great day.